ไม่มีชะเบยกะไม่มีชะเบยกะไม่มีชะเบย
There's a lot of hype, I think, about psychedelics at the moment, that it can change the world and so on and so forth. But these experiences, they only stay fleeting experiences unless we actually integrate that and we start to put what we learn into action. If there is an insight from psychedelics that we need to, help the world and so on and so forth, this beautiful world that we live in, but, it's really suffering at the moment. Just having these experiences is not enough. There are also many different layers of that we need to, I think, embody in order to bring it into fruition and action and manifest, and for it to move from an experience, a psychedelic experience, to reality. That gap, to bridge that gap, this is what I'm kind of interested in. Because what I see sometimes is like, okay, people have a great experience, but then they go back to their homes. That experience, that powerful experience, a very resourcing experience, or sometimes it might be a recollection of trauma, and an imprint that arises, it kind of gets lost, because, and the hype kind of takes over. And I feel that there is so much potential. What I've learned from my healing journey, there is so much potential to take that experience and to really make it a reality where it's integrated into the wholeness of a person's being, right? And then what you're doing, that resource, that psychedelic resource or that imprint, it's kind of part of who you are. And so an example of that really is all these, I talk about dissociation and fragmentation and being split off, which is really, as a trauma specialist, what I do, right? And as a facilitator, this is what I do. The process of healing trauma is really to welcome those split off parts back into wholeness, back into who we are, so that they can be felt and seen and held. And then they become part of us, and it's still a journey, to integrate them back into me, so that they are not lost. They're not disregarded. They're not rejected. There are parts of me now that actually don't hold pain, because I have, they're part of who I am, and that pain and suffering, there is freedom from that. So, yeah. So they walk with me, as I teach, as I'm here with you, as I do my everyday kind of things. They are my allies. They're part of me. And I hold them in really high regard. So that's what I mean by, the journey of integration and wholeness. And this is kind of part of my passion, part of my mission, is to inspire people to actually open up the perspective of integration, of psychedelic integration, because integration is, I would say, just as important as the psychedelic experience itself. And that bridging the gap, from an altered state, an experience that we have in a moment in time, to something that is actually tangible, something that's actually real. And I think that for myself, my purpose of psychedelics has always been really exploring the nature of consciousness, this nature of life. And when I think for myself, I mean, everybody's intention with psychedelics are very different. But because this has been something that's really important to me, enlightenment, awakening, understanding the true nature of consciousness, understanding the true nature of who I am, we start to understand, I think, from this work and also with spiritual practice as well, that we are connected to everyone. There is a unified field that we live in, and there is a high intelligence which is here. And we also realize that we are part of the intelligence. And in order for the world to heal, in order for humanity to thrive, we need to put action into it, right? We need to be part of the antidote to all times. And so this is kind of the category for me to be, when we kind of slowly move out of, turning inwards to more of a balance of being centered within ourselves, not losing ourselves, because a lot of people in service, trust me, because I've been working in this field for over 2 decades, I have lost myself in service too. But to have kind of this balance, so being in ourselves, occupying ourselves, our needs, but then also starting to face the world and being connected to the world in a way that can inform us of what the world needs in terms of an antidote, in terms of service, in terms of medicine. And I strongly believe that we all have something to offer. We all, as human beings, we all have a personal medicine inside, whether we are connected to it or not, that lives inside of us. And even this kind of desire, I think, to help the world. For me, in the tradition, and I've trained in many traditions, but in the tradition, I think that I lean heavily on, which is more in an Eastern philosophy tradition, the path of service can be a path of spiritual awakening. So in yoga, I mean, not yoga asana, but in yoga philosophy, we call it karma yoga. And the thing that's really different, I think, that I have learned from my teachers is that, karma yoga is a spiritual practice of action, where we are in action, like a meditation, where we let go of really the outcome. And it's very interesting because when we are in action, the ego comes up, we like to attach ourselves, identify ourselves to roles and the things that we do, especially with service. And I think that also in the indigenous traditions, we talk about that too. And this is really a path of heart, of action, of devotion, I would say, that we are doing, showing up to support people like a hollow bone in the Hopi tradition. That we are, in service, and it's a place where it's kind of like an offering, an offering to the divine, an offering to the Most High. And we can learn so much about that if our kind of path of awakening really is to really settle into that true nature of consciousness. I think that true nature of, connection with all of life, right? Connection with the high intelligence. So this is actually what I've learned from, being of service, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and, still I get whipped for, in a metaphorical sense, when, my ego kind of comes up in this place of service. And when I can have the discernment, I think, and the humility to act from a place of deep devotion and the softening of my ego, I learn a lot. I learn a lot about love, first and foremost. I learn a lot from my clients. I learn a lot from the populations that I work with. I learn a lot from that because I work with humans, and I work with humanity, the heart of humanity, and pain and sorrow, and really, track that process and journey for healing, which is different for everybody. It's really a gift, and it's very much an honor, to hold that for myself. And I learned that a lot, and I learned a lot from being able to work with something a little bit that's not my ego. It's really able to tap into a vibration and energy that's really bigger than myself. Is something that has really supported my kind of, my spiritual awakening, my happiness, I'd say, the meaning that I have in life. And the other thing that I really like to say with the service part is, with karma yoga, it is about action. And so I would love to just inspire audiences out there, if you have something that you would like to offer the world that could, whatever topic it might be, something that really calls to your heart, use what you have learned in psychedelics to make that action, to make that change. You don't understand how small something can be, because I've been on like these big kind of projects where, you're working with sex trafficking, survivors of war and torture. It's like earthquake, disaster relief, it just feels like the suffering is so humongous. And I know that audiences out there resonate with that, because we have a lot of things in the world that it's like suffering beyond what we can even fathom, But what I understand from being in those environments on the ground in the field is that acts of kindness, like little things, they make a difference, they really make a difference to the heart of humanity. And when we can put our egos out of the way, and when I say egos, it's like our insecurities, our imposter syndrome, all the things that we kind of move through, which is part of I think, the purification of getting to that place of like pure heart and love and connection with the divine. It makes a difference. It really does. These small little acts of unconditional love. I think that that's what humanity needs at the moment. It's what our earth needs at the moment. That's what we need at the moment. If, we're in a personal healing process. And it's about action. It is about action. So it's a kind of holistic model, just meditating on it. I think if we want to step into meditation and pondering and reflection, they have their part to play, I think, in life. So the more we can start to, find that balance, and also that dance between, non-doing and doing, our mind, our hearts, our bodies, and the more we can find that integration, more that wholeness, that will be a resource in being of service, I think, to the world. And it's definitely been a big learning for me in my life. Yeah.
Mai mi sha với ca, mai mi sha với ca, mai mi sha với